Can you welcome Kristina for me?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Can you guys hear me? How's that? Awesome. Hi, how are you? I'm going to flip the charts on you for a second and ask you to do something that a speaking coach of mine asked a long time ago, and have you guys say cheese. This is what it's like. I promise it won't end up on Twitter. Well, actually, it might. My name is Kristina Anderson, and it's an honor to be here today. Thank you so much for having me here for the Criminal Justice League and Dr. Madfitz, we've been working with quite some time. I'm going to share with you today a very personal story of something that happened to me when I was in college at Virginia Tech, and something that fundamentally changed my views on life, safety, security, because quite honestly, I didn't really have a lot of opinions on any of those topics beforehand. And to kind of kick it off, I'm going to show you a picture that is incredibly embarrassing that I'm not going to share with too many people, but that was me, freshman year of college. I was the typical 19-year-old, as you can tell by the huge glasses, very much carefree. Virginia Tech, for those of you, well, what kind of, I guess, enabled that lifestyle for those of you that have not been, has anyone been to Virginia Tech or Blacksburg? Okay, got a few. Tech is a massive campus, so we're about 4 hours south of Washington, D.C., which is the largest kind of city next to it. It's 2,700 acres, so it's a huge community. But people there, kind of have a way to find a bond, either through academics or football or love of orange and maroon. Even though it's a huge campus, there's a very big community feel. And it's a typical kind of college environment where the biggest thing people ever actually kind of feared was kind of maybe alcohol or drugs, very typical things. I used to get in fights with my roommates about actually locking the door when they would, because I never did. So it's the last kind of place that you'd ever expect something like this to really happen. And the morning of the 16th, I was a sophomore. I was living off campus, so I was 19 years old, studying international relations. It started for me really every other day in that I was late. A friend of mine had called and said, I'm on the way to come pick you up for class. And when he called, I totally lied and said, yes, I'm ready. I jumped out of bed. I looked outside, and I remember seeing snow, which is pretty rare for Blacksburg in the middle of April. Because it was snowing, for the first time in a long time, I made a very quick decision on my shoes, which I'm sure ladies in the room, how much time we put into that. The joke was that I always wore flip-flops. In the middle of winter, I would still wear those sneakers, but because it was cold, I actually wore the sneakers, the closed-toed shoes. And it sounds like a really, really small decision, which it is, but it makes a little bit of difference a little bit later in the story. So Colin and I speed off to class, and this is this is kind of a partial map of Virginia Tech. It's split up into two parts. So this portion down here is the residence life. This is where people live, eat, study. Over here is our library, post office. This is the drill field. It's this massive field that breaks up the campus into two. It's a Corps Cadet university, so we have people. It was founded by Corps cadets. They used to drill up and down. It's the size of a football field. On this end is all of the academic life. All of the classes. By the time we get to class, the campus is actually pretty much empty because people are already inside the buildings. And we actually talked about skipping because we were so late. But because it was a French class and French is heavily tied to attendance, we decided to go. We actually got into a little bit of fight of who was going to walk in first. And we head to Norris Hall. Now, some of you might have seen this picture before. Norris Hall is an engineering building. It's a very, very old building on our campus. It's 4 floors. This was the first and last class that I ever had in this building. And what's interesting about it is Norris Hall, it's L-shaped, and there's this is the shorter part, and there's a longer part. What's interesting about the building is the entire building only has 3 exits. And if you think about this room in particular, I see 5 just in here, but police have since described to me as almost like a fortress. It's a very, very easy building to lock down if you want to, because that door in the front is very, very heavy. It's a far drop between the windows, and it's also kind of hard to actually break in and get in if you want to. So my memory every day is I would run to the front of the building, I would pull open the door, and I would run upstairs to the 2nd floor as quickly as possible to get to class. Because we were late and Colin knew a faster way through a side entrance, we actually went through a side door. We climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, and this is what we saw. Now, this is a renovated picture of the hallway. Again, it's an engineering building, so imagine very, very narrow hallway, white stark walls, nothing's really on them, and all the doors are closed because class have already begun. So we actually had to count down the doors to our class. And I remember getting there and seeing 211. It was in big black letters right above our door. And like I said, Colin and I got into a fight of who's going to go in first. Because it's Monday morning, it's a 15-minute class, it's kind of awkward to walk in that late together. And because he was 6 foot, I thought I could hide behind him. So we're there, I let him go in first. And this is the classroom that we walk into. To give you guys a little bit of perspective, it's a 19 by 20 room, so it's fairly small. This whole area is windows. Here's the door. There's not a window in the door, just a solid wood, and the teacher is up here. What's interesting is, I'm sure like you guys know in college, you don't have assigned seats, but you normally kind of sit in the same exact places, right? No matter what. So Madame knew this, and she would purposely move us around and have us work with different people during the class, at the beginning of the class. Because we were late, we missed that. So by the time that we arrive, we walk in, she gives us that smirk of like, why are you late? Hands us our assignment, and we head to the back left corner of the classroom where we always sat. But, however, at this point, people have already been moved around. They are not sitting where they should be. As I walk down this aisle, I remember looking over and seeing my friend Ross, and Ross gave me that look again of like, why are you late? But he should have been sitting behind us. He should have been sitting right here with Colin. It's a very, very small room. Like I said, I'll show you the desks in a little bit, but there's not a lot of places to move, and just people are not really with their things, which makes a big difference down the line. As we sat down, I have no memory at all what we were studying that morning. I think it was like French verbs, something like that. What I did is I took off my sweatshirt because it was hot. I leaned my back on the hallway, and I were just kind of chatting with people about the weekend and catching up because it was a Monday morning. I remember speaking with Leslie Sherman quite a bit. She was to my left, and we were talking about a study abroad program. They were supposed to go to Russia that semester, and I'm Russian. I was born and raised there, and I was going for the credit, like I'll be honest. It was 2 weeks of fast credit, but she was so excited about the experience and going abroad, and I remember actually being like really kind of taken back by that. But as we're standing there, Rachel Hill walks in, and this is a story that not many people actually know. So Rachel was a freshman in our class. She was a really, really good student, and when she walked in, we're all kind of like, you're 45 minutes late almost, Rachel, kind of what's up? So something's already happened that, at that time, neither of us knew about, that now we all do. At 7:05 that morning, our shooter walked from his dorm down here in the south of campus into her dorm, which is right here. Her dorm was called West Ambler Johnson. It's about 400 people, it's massive. He followed a girl who had been dropped off by her boyfriend. He went to a nearby university. He got in because his mailbox was in the building, so he was able to do the card access control to get in. He followed her in through a different entrance, followed her to her room. He shot her there, and then he shot the resident advisor who came to check on her. So she passed away on the scene, and Ryan passed away on the way to the hospital. From there, our shooter went back to his dorm, and he was swiped back in at his place like 10 minutes after. So when police got to the scene, they see a man and a woman. He's in shorts. They think it's domestic violence. And they start looking for her boyfriend, who's now driving back to his school, which is 20 minutes away. Now, police have said that if he had stopped right then and there, they would never have caught him. But when they released the lockdown from this building, because again, it's like 400 people, you can't keep the whole thing closed, Rachel left, and she walked back into class. Again, I don't know the exact way that she went, but there's only so few ways you can go. And to give you perspective, that's like a mile. Now, for someone who would skip for like a coffee and a bagel, I think that's pretty remarkable, because I think she's one of the last people to get inside of Norris before he chained the doors. So he chained the doors from the inside, and he wrote a note on the outside that said, if you try to break in, a bomb won't go off. One of the janitors actually found one of the notes, and he took it to his supervisor. He took it upstairs, which again, I'm sure that's policy and protocol and what you're supposed to do, but if you saw doors chained, wouldn't you kind of think that something was suspicious? There was another story of a girl whose office was on the first floor. She left to get coffee or something, came back, the door was chained. She broke in through a window and didn't tell anyone again. So Rachel walks in, and she thinks there's been a shooting. We hear the words murder, things like that, but I'm sitting in class with literally a notebook and a textbook. We have no laptops, we don't have smartphones yet. Twitter had just launched, to give you perspective. And I distinctly remember thinking, someone let her out. Someone let her come into this room. It must be fine. I was in no way concerned. And it had been seconds after that we first heard the first gunshots. Some of the classrooms he had peered into beforehand to see how many people, which ones had the most amount of people essentially. Ours, he didn't. At that time, even then, people said, it's strange that someone's, lost this late in the semester, but no one really stood up. I almost felt them before I could, see them, because I felt the intensity on the right side of on the hallway, and people said they thought it was construction or, something else. It's too loud. It was alarmingly loud. My teacher went to the front of the class. She went to the door, and she looked outside, and she quickly came back, and she said, call 911. And you could almost see the look of panic just drain on her face. And I don't think she even got the door to close before he walked in. He literally walked in, he shot her first, and he shot Matt Laporte and Henry Lee right there at the front. So it was kind of like there. And he took an active shooter stance from the other part of the classroom. Now, to me, like I said, the gunshot sounded like an axe being taken to a piece of wood, just very, very quickly, one after the other. And in those moments between her seeing him outside, she must have seen him, kind of suited up, to her saying, call 911, I got on the floor. I went to middle school in California. We had, unannounced tornado drills. So I just thought, okay, something's happening. I got down. We had these kinds of desks, the one you slide into, you put your books underneath. I got on the floor. I put my knees in the chair, stomach on the seat, hands overhead, and just kind of waited. And when he came back to this area, I looked left because I'm thinking, okay, the intrusion is here. So whatever's outside is entered our classroom, what is it? And I saw the top of a man, just the torso. He looked very stern. He was wearing a salmon colored sweatshirt, and he had two things here. They were mags. He was ready. He had, they found a backpack afterwards with enough ammunition to do a lot more damage, essentially. He was very well prepared. And I saw his arms outstretched like this. And I must have seen the guns, but I honestly didn't really, process at that time. And I quickly went back and just covered my head. And I can't tell you guys how to describe it, except that he literally went down the rows of people. It was very sequential. It was very, very fast. He didn't say anything. He just shot and shot and shot. And I knew because I could hear the shots one after the other. And with each shot, there was, a squeal or, a person that evoked a sound. It's a small room, and I can almost feel the intensity getting closer and closer because he's shooting right to left. I remember telling myself, brace yourself, your turn is going to come. I didn't know what those words exactly meant. I thought it was actually a paintball gun. I didn't think it was a shooting, but I remember doing this, saying it's coming towards you, get ready. And the first time he shot me was in the back. Getting shot doesn't actually hurt as much as you think. I mean, it hurts, but it's just a sting. It's a very, very sharp, fast sting. And what really hurts is when it stays in you and it kind of goes in further and starts to burn. That's when it's really painful. But when it first hits you, it's more like your body just tries to own it and take care of yourself and make sure that you don't pass away. But he shot me the first time in the back, and then he left. When he left, because he went into different classrooms, up and down the hallway essentially, we still heard gunshots, still very, very loud, but no one in my class is moving. Every single person but one was shot at least once, minimum of 3 times. Some people, to be honest with you, were found in the desks. They hadn't had time to get to the floor. One person in a different room was shot 19 times. So I'm hearing, phones are ringing a little bit. I'm hearing coughing. I remember looking left and thinking, why is she coughing? Because it was a very, very foreign sound. It was almost like a gurgling, and I remember thinking, why is she making noise? Because my instincts were to be quiet. My instincts were just stay down and it'll be over. And in reality, she was dying. When he came back, it was scarier, because the first time he just shot. I mean, it was just you didn't really have time to think or plan or do anything like that. When he came back, it was more intermittent. He was looking to see who was alive. And I think I could feel that, I could tell. The scariest part was when he shot above my head. He shot above, and obviously he missed, but I looked up and I saw the gray silver bullet in the wall with the debris, and the debris fell and it hit my arm, and I breathed it in. I was extremely thirsty for the rest of that duration. But to this day, I think, what an idiot. Why did I look up? Why did I tell him that I was alive? Because at that point, my instincts to play dead were, unfortunately, valuable. He shot me again in the back. I'll be honest, it was the butt. I've become more open with that. It's fine. Most of the wounds were in the head and the buttocks region. He shot to kill, like I said. No one was really close to surviving. And the entire room was just incredibly hot and muggy. Gunpowder, the way I try to explain it is, when you go to a sauna and you breathe in that warm kind of floral sense, with vanilla and spice, it's that same filling of your lungs where it's really comprehensive, but instead it's hot and muggy and pungent. And so I was just incredibly thirsty. He left again for a 3rd time. He came back. And the 3rd time he took his own life in front of our classroom. So he killed himself right around here. By that point, I'm in so much pain because I've been hunched over in this position for 12 minutes. And I pushed myself off. And Colin, who was the guy who drove me to class, he was shot 4 times, mostly here and here. He says, don't move, because he's cognizant of what's going on. I'm thinking, I have to. So I finally kind of pushed myself off and just lay on the carpet, and we hold hands, waiting for the police to come in. Police finally got in through a side door. Again, students are trying to get out while they're trying to get in. Before the shooting, there was never a time when you could, had to get to the building, couldn't actually open the door. So they got in through a service door, they broke it through, and they were on the stairs that we had, the same stairs that we had gone up when they first heard gunshots. They think that when he heard the gunshots, he took his own life. What I'm going to play for you right now is cell phone footage taken outside of Norris Hall by one of the students. You'll hear, it's a little bit gargly because it's snowing outside, you'll hear the wind, but you'll also hear some of the gunshots and just how quickly and repetitively they were happening. I'm like there. One of the students in the back of my classroom, the only one who wasn't shot, finally jumped up and he let the police in. There were too many bags and people, honestly, in the way they couldn't get in. When the police first got on the hallway and they saw the amount of debris and bullets and people, because some people had come from the third floor when they had heard the gunshots and they were shot and killed in the hallway as well, they couldn't believe one person had did that much carnage. So instinctively they're looking for another person. But they break into our room, and it's almost like in the movies, because I'm laying there and I can't speak, but I can think and I'm awake, and I hear the guy say, I see like the SWAT on his stomach, and he's all suited up. The first thing I hear him say is, "We have a lot of blacks in here." And I'm laying on the floor thinking like, that's a weird thing to say. And I look over and I see Leslie Sherman, and she's not moving. She's very, very still. I don't see any blood, but I knew that she was dead. I learned afterwards that police have about 30 seconds when they call, they break into a scene, they call a room. So green means you're injured but you're okay, yellow means you're severely injured, red means you're critical, black means you're dead. So before this guy took 3 steps, he should have given us a lot more time, he essentially called our room. The shooting was about 12 minutes. He killed 11 students and my teacher. So 12 people in total. Caitlin Hammerman, Austin Cloyd, Rima Samaha, Matt Laporte, Ross Aldamine, Rachel, Madame, Henry Lee, Daniel Perez, Aaron Peterson, Mary Reed, and Leslie Sherman. I'm still close with a lot of their parents because they're from the same area that I was from. And in total, 32 people lost their lives. So it's the worst school shooting committed by a single person ever. I mean, it's just, no number is ever right, but that's just catastrophic in terms of being able to quantify and do that much damage in 12 minutes. And they might have been 10. They don't exactly know how long it lasted. The SWAT person comes over to me, Colin tells him, she's alive, and he's standing over above me, and first he says yellow, and I'm thinking, okay. And then it quickly changes to red. And that's when I start panicking, because going from yellow to red is just not good, no matter what the case is. And I just went extremely cold, from top to bottom. I didn't think I was gonna die, but I just wanted it to stop. Because at this point, it's been 20 minutes. And I just I had this wave from top to bottom, and he picked me up and he carried me outside back in the hallway. And I was essentially hunched up out here. And they took Colin out and they put Colin in front of me, and he was actually, awake. And as the officers are coming up, they would come up to you and they would hit your face and they'd try to wake you up, and they called me everything from Ashley to Sarah to Mary Beth, and finally he was her name is Kristina. But it's just chaos because we're seeing people run left and right because they don't know how many people are shooting, who else is injured. It took them 3 hours to clear out the top building because people were still hiding. Because can you imagine you overheard that entire thing? You wouldn't want to come out and be privy to that. So finally one person picked me up. He carried me down the same staircase that we had walked into. And again, I remember like seeing and feeling, because he moved his leg, him stepping over a person who was killed in the stairwell. Again, I remember thinking, like, that's a body, but it hasn't quite hit yet because it's just too much shock and too much fear. He carried me down the stairs, and then he carried me out the longer path of the hallway, and he passed me off to Patrick, who is a law enforcement officer from a nearby area. And I told Patrick, well, I said the only words that moment that I had said the entire time. I told Patrick, thank you, which I give credit to my mom's good manners. But I knew, even then, that I was being taken from a place of severe evil out. And right as we left Norris Hall, this picture was taken, which I secretly hate for other reasons as well, but you guys might have seen it on other media outlets. But this is taken at 10:22, so this is about 40 minutes after the shooting's been over. There's me, and there's Colin being carried out. I don't know if you can tell with the fuzziness, but those blue shoes. So I was shot 3 times, twice in the back, and the third was in the toe. And the toe was like a ricochet bullet. They're not actually quite sure how it went in, but those shoes saved my toe because it blocked it, because the hard plastic and the rubber, had I been wearing the flip-flops, wouldn't have a toe. And right after that, what they do is they throw you on the ground, and they basically cut open your clothes to see where you've been injured, because they don't know the severity of the gunshots. And I'm just thinking, like, what color underwear am I wearing? Because I'm naked outside. Thank you, girls. You can relate. Like, you were that age. I was 19 years old, and they were red. It was bright color. And again, the paramedic's saying, you've been shot, and I'm like, what? I'm not really quite getting it quite yet. And they threw me into an ambulance with another survivor who I know now, but we've never talked. I don't remember her being in the car at all. And I rode with Derek, who was from a nearby hospital as well. And the entire time Derek's saying, like, wake up, like, what major are you? Your eyes are so pretty, blah, blah. I'm thinking, like, shut up, because I'm in so much pain at this point. But what they don't tell you is they don't want you to fall asleep, because they don't know if you're going to wake up or what the extent of the injuries are. But I got to the hospital, and I was quickly kind of taken into x-rays and all that. And it was at the hospital that they called my mother, and they told her. So she was in Northern Virginia, it's about 4 hours north of where the school was, at the dry cleaners. And I don't know how the news broke here, but, well, because it was earlier, I guess, in the morning. But there, it started out with, like, 2 people shot, 4 people shot, 8, and then, like, quickly kind of jumped to, like, the 10s and the 20s and all that. So she hadn't really known yet that something was wrong. It was my surgeon who called her, and he told her in, like, 3 swooped, whoops, your daughter's been shot, we have to operate, and we can't wait for you. If any of you have, like, siblings or parents or, kids in your life, you can imagine what that's like. She said she just dropped to the floor, and she thankfully, like, wasn't too far from our house. She went home. My father is an engineer, so he's very logical. He put her in the car. He put my brother, who was 6 months at the time, and said, we'll buy whatever we need on the way there, and they sped towards Virginia Tech. Ironically, my dad went to Columbine, which is a weird side note, but yeah, it's my stepfather. And it was that summer that, like, we were doing recovery and we were traveling, and he took us to Columbine. Like, we went to see his house in Denver, and he pulled into the school, and I was like, what are you doing? And we had to leave. But what's scary about that moment in time is that the way they tell a story is that they were just, speeding for the entire time. And I went, like, Mom, like, why? Why did you? Because I knew that I was okay. I never thought I was going to die. And in reality, they didn't know for like 2 hours. It was about halfway in the trip before my surgeon called them back and said, she's going to be okay, slow down, take your time, kind of thing. And this is just an x-ray again to prove that I have my toe. The hospital was a zoo. So I woke up around 4 p.m. and my roommates were in the room, my parents were in the room. The first thing I said was, how did you know where to find me? And I remember looking out and seeing these, like, very blank, aghast faces looking back at me of, like, who's going to tell her? The TV was on, like that little, hospital TVs they have, and I looked up, and that picture of myself being carried out was on it, the one that I just showed you. And of course I recognized myself. I'm like, why am I on TV? That was turned off. Because to me, I still thought that it happened in my classroom. I thought it was only to us, and it was very, very singular. I hadn't really been able to comprehend the fact that he could have gone to other classrooms. And the way that, I've talked about it since, they tell me that I asked about Madame and Colin before I went into surgery. Colin also says that we actually spoke before I went to surgery, like on the phone. I have no idea. But it was a couple days until I finally asked my dad, what happened to me and what happened to, my peers. Because when I woke up, I had like a line of just staples down the stomach, and I had like, a needle and a vein and a doctor for every part of my body. Like, I couldn't move. So I knew something was wrong. And in total, I lost my gallbladder, 2/3 of my left kidney, and parts of my large and small intestine. So kind of like this whole region was just really like messed up. So everything you need your stomach for, like from speaking loudly to coughing. I used to like hold a pillow so I wouldn't like hurt myself. I couldn't eat. I lost 8 pounds, which was great. I gained it back. But yeah, it's very different to go from being like the invincible kind of 19-year-old to someone who like literally, if I could walk, from here to there, they gave me like those strollers that, with the golf balls or tennis balls at the end. If I could do that, that was an accomplishment. And it's a very hard like mental place to be in at the time. We had media pretending to be clergymen try to break in to interview us. We had everyone and their mom try to come and visit, which, don't get me wrong, is incredibly nice, but at the time when you can't eat or walk or do anything for yourself, it's not really the best time to be getting help. The only people that I did want to see were some of the first responders, which I'm still close with today, because I cannot imagine having to not only go into that kind of crime scene, but also have to actually work it and to respond. So I'm incredibly grateful to everything that law enforcement does every single day. And that's Hillary Strollo, who's also one of the survivors. She is from Pennsylvania, and we actually have a similar scar from it. So I did not go back to tech that semester. I went home and just recovered. I got a 4.0 that semester, which is great. And I just went home, and I had to I went to physical therapy. I had to learn how to answer certain questions. A lot of people would ask things like, did you know anyone? Were you in a car accident? Because I looked okay, and because I was wearing kind of loose clothing. It wasn't until that I was trying to keep up with the 70-year-olds that they realized something was wrong. But the whole thing of, are you a kind of a victim versus survivor, fears of being alone started to kind of manifest in that time. When it was time to go back to school, my mother said, really no way. My father said, we'll do whatever you support. And so for me, it was not a question to go back to Virginia Tech, because it's where my friends were. It's where my family, like I said, the whole Hokie bond is really, really strong. And I felt like there was really no one else in the world that could really understand what that day was like, what that experience was like as tech. Looking back, I probably went back a little bit too soon, because I jumped back into what my life was before. One of the first things I did, I went to a party, and it was people from all different states, everyone's getting back together and reuniting, and I was just scared. Because I'm in this room, and everyone's intoxicated, and I'm thinking, how am I gonna get out if something happens? There's no way for me to escape. You guys don't know what's going on. I just had a lot of kind of paranoia. And so that only kind of picked up out in the classroom itself, because a lot of classrooms look the same. And I had classes with other survivors. If someone were to walk in late, we would all kind of perk up, because our shooter came in late, and we'd kind of check each other of it's okay, kind of calm down. If I heard loud banging or any kind of noise above my head, I would, one, I'd be okay, two, I'm checking it out kind of thing. I would obsess about exits, how I could get out of a certain place. I would never, and I still really don't, sit in the front of a room if I can help it. I prefer the back, because at least you've secured your perimeter in some ways, and you have some time to make a decision about certain things if you have to respond. It's hard to really classify why I survived, how I survived, and all those different questions. But for me personally, everyone that lived was in the back left corner of the classroom. And I think just because he actually could not get there. So I prefer kind of those areas. Anxiety, fears that it's going to happen again, fears of irrational things. I would follow people that I thought were sketchy, just kind of visually see what was going on. And one of the hardest parts was being alone. I was a very independent person before, and I still think I am, but I realized that Sunday nights are really, really hard. I would be studying, I would think that, nothing was really going on, and all of a sudden I would just start crying. And the worst of it kind of hit in December. It's about 8 months afterwards. I was in my apartment. Again, nothing had set me off, nothing, I didn't watch any YouTube video, I didn't read any article, but all of a sudden I started this very, very soft bawl, this cry, and it was painful and quiet and really confusing, and the worst part was it wouldn't stop. So I finally got on Google, and I said, PTSD, because you have some ideas, and sure enough, it was check, 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 check. So I went to the on-campus counseling center at first, and I don't know if you guys have tried therapy in different ways, but with Virginia Tech, when I first went, the first thing they do is they give you a questionnaire. It's an online, it's a computer, and there's 20 questions, everything from do you eat rarely, do you have an eating disorder, do you want to kill yourself? By the time you answer the questions, you want to kill yourself. It was not supportive. And when I got in the room with the guy, the poor person, he didn't know who I was. Again, they were overwhelmed with requests, because it was a larger community than just the survivors that were healing. There were 17, I think, of us that were injured. All of us went back. But there were some people that weren't, even in the building that couldn't go back, and I don't blame them, because anyone could relate to that. You guys can relate to that. You weren't, even in Virginia perhaps, but we could all be those students in that classroom. We could all have a friend there, and so they had a really hard time managing that. But the poor guy, again, didn't know, what he was like, what the issue was, and there was construction going on in the building above my head. So as we're sitting there, I'm trying to express to him that I'm afraid to like shower, but that someone's on the other side. There's a hammering going on, and so it wasn't the best experience. I eventually went off campus and found a really great marriage counseling therapist. That was her background. And every day, or twice a week, we would talk about, okay, so what happened? Walk me through the story. And the best thing she gave me was basically that I was having normal reactions to an abnormal situation. And I was late to Jane every single session for the first year or so. And then by senior year, I was like dressed up, makeup, ready to go, because that was my time to kind of to release it and to vent. Even though family and friends and parents wanted to help, it was really, really hard to say, okay, I'm gonna tell you about the worst day of my life, and hopefully you can relate in some way. When you go back and when you survive these kind of things, and I think it's true of all trauma, it does not have to be a school shooting, whether you've lost a loved one or an animal or you're in a car accident, you wanna go back and think that you're the same person you were before. That you've somehow, can just erase that part of your life. But in reality, it's more about gaining like this new normal that we, have to find. And so that was, therapy for me was an extremely helpful part of my recovery. I graduated in 2009. I think most people look forward to graduation. I was ecstatic. I had ordered my diploma months in advance. I love Virginia Tech, but I was ready to get out just because of all the visual reminders. Norris Hall is still there. I had to go back in there many times. I was very excited to graduate, and these are some of the folks that we stayed in touch. These are the other survivors. They were, in addition to therapy, a really, really important part of our counseling. Virginia Tech set up an Office of Recovery and Support after the shooting, so we had people to go to that were responsible for everything from getting classes scheduled to getting parking, whatever issue I had, they could deal with it. But they couldn't really understand what it was like, and so it wasn't until we could actually take them out of the equation and get together as a group and add beer and a few shots, that we could have really frank discussions of so what did you go through? What happened to you? Because for instance, Heidi, I'm still really good friends with, there she is, the orange dress, 2 rows up from me. Very different experience of what happened to her, different sounds, different memories, and it's very, very validating to be able to hear that and think, okay, I'm not crazy for having these thoughts. We learned that Justin over here on the right still carries the wallet with the hole where the bullet went through at all times. He thinks it saved, his butt or something, I don't know. But it was just a very, very important experience to be able to have in terms of moving forward and recovering. I went to France afterwards. Actually, I taught English for 9 months in the south of France, which was amazing. And when I came back, it was time to kind of think about, what am I gonna do now? What's my path? And I'll be honest, I never really thought about pursuing campus safety. This was not one of my to-dos. I was thinking about going to law school. But I learned, and there was a very pivotal dinner that I had with someone who worked on research called the Safe School Initiative. I thought Virginia Tech was going to be the first and last shooting, mostly because so many people were injured. I know it's a little bit naive, but I thought 32 people died. It won't happen again. And even when I was in school, it kept happening. Northern Illinois University, there was a big shooting there in 2008. 5 people were killed, well, 4. Finland had 2 shootings back to back while I was still in school. And since then, I think, as we all know, we've had Norway, Newtown, Okonos, there's been a plethora of them. And with each one, it's almost like you're reliving your own shooting as well. Because you can totally understand, no matter if it's 2 people or 10, what those families are going through, what the victims are going through, what the community is going through, and it's just painful. And I thought, why does it have to happen? I was at a dinner with Bill Modulewski, who was one of the guys who worked on this, and he told me about this study. So it was done in 2002, I think, and they looked at 37 incidents of school violence. I promise you this is the most boring slide I'll show. And they wanted to research, are these things preventable? Are they predictable? Or are they really these random acts of violence as we see them? And they actually interviewed some people who didn't kill themselves, most of them do, and they found out a couple of interesting things. One is that they're rarely sudden attacks. In 2 or 86% of the cases they looked at, 2 to 3 people had information about the event before it happened. Now, these weren't, teachers, they weren't principals, they were mostly their peers. They were their colleagues, people kind of on the ground, but no one said anything. And on top of that, they found they had planned them, anywhere from 2 weeks to a year. So, and then there's leakage, so there's information that's dropped and revealed. And nowadays, that information is coming out on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, so many other ways that people can kind of hint at things. So I thought, wait a minute, there's a clear, timeline of something being planned. It's not random. No one wakes up when they decide to commit a school shooting. And they tell people. That to me is hope. That means that we can teach people how to speak up. That means we can help each other kind of prevent these before they happen, versus wondering how quickly do police get there, or how quickly do we lock down, and things like that. We spend a lot of time thinking about questions, I think, about guns and cameras and all these other issues, but the fact that they can prove this, and they even established this as a timeline, it's kind of 4 paths that someone goes on between thinking about something to actually being a campus shooter, that we can teach our students and our teachers to identify. I thought this was more interesting than thinking about how to lock down a school. And that's kind of what brings me to what I do now. I work on 2 things. I have a nonprofit. It's the Koshka Foundation, which you got perfectly right, thank you. And it's LiveSafe, but everyone says LiveSafe, so I don't know. Through the foundation, I do trainings and presentations for law enforcement, emergency managers from the survivor's perspective. I also do events with other survivors. So we brought together people from Columbine, Shard, Newtown to help heal, I guess, and then share some stories. And then through LiveSafe, it's a company out of DC. We're working on a mobile app, which you guys can actually download and check out if you want. It's free. It essentially allows students to report information, whether it's a question or a tip or a broken window, to their law enforcement, to their police. And they can add a picture, video, audio evidence. They can do it anonymously, which is really, really cool because most people don't like to share their information. But it's all about kind of creating this new 2-way path where if you see someone, if you think that someone might be having an issue or a problem, you don't have to make a phone call. You don't have to walk into someone's office, because I know that's scary, and we don't really communicate that way. I don't call my parents anymore. I text them. So the app is it's in 8 states. We're working with different colleges. Also, actually military base, which is semi-relevant with what happened today. And there's also emergency path, which allows you, when you call the police, we share the location with the law enforcement. GPS technology was not where it is now on April 16th. So I think things like this could have actually helped police get there faster in a smarter way. And yeah, if you guys download the app, let me know what you think about it later. I'd love your thoughts, because you're the target audience. I've been asked to think a little bit about, so where do we go from here in terms of how do we actually prevent these things? How do we think about campus violence, in general? And I think it's kind of 2-part. There's the fact that it has to be an individual agency. We have to take accountability as people that we're going to help prevent these things. We're going to speak up. We're going to allow someone to share information before it happens, because I think if we can't tolerate a school shooting, we shouldn't tolerate our friends potentially being raped in the dorm, or someone getting in last minute, or things like that. Yeah. And some of that kind of stems from the questions that we ask before and after. A lot of times I hear things about how did he get in? How did he get the gun, and X, Y, Z? Instead, we could be thinking about things like why? And that's a harder thing to really think about, obviously, but what brought them to that point? What was the pathway to violence? Who could have known about it in advance? Who are the families, right? What does their recovery look like? Is there a memorial? If we kind of categorize these things as only tragic massacres that happen in these off-site locations, we'll never really, I think, fully realize the potential that we could have to prevent them. Virginia Tech, don't get me wrong, it is very tragic. It is a massacre. But it was just a person in a room for 12 minutes who had complete control. That's something that we can all fathom, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. He essentially fell through the cracks. We can talk about it later, but there was no motive beyond the fact that he was really, really angry. We were not targeted. There was not a person he was looking to kill in that building. He just wanted to kill as many people as possible. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. I think I'm going to break it up to kind of 3 things that I think we can each do as individuals on a daily basis. I think when you think about how we use language, one thing I hear is, I guess talk about first the perpetrator's name. If you guys have noticed, I have not said his name once. I know his name, obviously. But when we promote media or we support media that blatantly flashes someone's picture, or we constantly talk about their name or refer to them, it A, gives them what they want. It's kind of like glorification, it's what they were doing it in the first place for. But it also B, kind of shows these other potential outliers, people that might be on the tipping scale of going above that path, that this is what happens when you commit a shooting, or this is what happens when you rob people or commit other violence. And so I think it's much more important to kind of depower them and not talk about their name in the same way that we should, but talk about some of the survivors and the victims, or in the school where it happened, or whatever it may be. I guarantee you no one knows those 12 names I showed you earlier. The principal at Columbine High School starts his talks whenever he does it by reading all of the names of the kids. And even I'm I have to kind of go back and check because I don't remember them. But we always know the name of the people that did the shooting. The other one is about survivor versus victim. I feel very, very adamant about this, and I'll let media call me a victim, and that's fine. But I think it's incredibly important to look at it as the survivors. It's not saying that we're in any way denying what happened, but it's also showing a continuation, a path to move on and to resolve. Because if you're a victim, you're kind of stuck in the same path, right? So just try to throw out survivor. As educators and as parents, if any of you, I don't know if any of you have kids, but you might know some kids, my thing there is about training. We have to be not bluntly honest, but we have to acknowledge that this is a reality that we live in. Only 30 years ago, people used to die in fire drills all the time. I'm not fire drills, just fires. But we've taken things, we've taken mitigated action to reduce the risk of fire. And I think the same thing has to be done for school safety. I think what's important about that is when you think about active shooters, trainings, and all these different manuals, it can't be articulated as Virginia Tech or Newtown as the example. Because when you talk about it as, you want to prevent Virginia Tech, we all know what happened at Virginia Tech, and that's too scary to think about 13 people passing away than it is just the fact that a guy might rob you and you should know where to go if he does, or you should know how to get out of a building if there's a fire. That's a much more realistic approach because school shootings are rare, but you should still think about it. And as law enforcement, this is really just for you, I thought there'd be more people, would be frank and honest and transparent. And that's just, people kind of demand information. Virginia Tech, when they sent out the email alert that went out at 9:45, right when he killed himself, they had the same amount of information they did at 8:30. And the alert just said, kind of stay safe and be aware. And I'm not saying it's Virginia Tech's fault by any means, but the more you communicate, whether it be through social media, whatever it is, people will trust you, and people have brains, they'll make their own decisions about what to do. And obviously building a culture that encourages reporting and sharing information. So that's all I had. Thank you guys so much for, I know that was a really heavy story. I think we're gonna have a panel now of Q&A, and either write it on the postcard or come up and share your questions. Thank you.